dragon is a fabulous and universal symbolic figure found in most cultures throughout the world. Every continent on Earth, except Antarctica, has a history of dragon, serpent, and reptilian mythology. The stories of reptilian creatures date back to the earliest human writings, those of Sumer and Babylon, as well as other civilizations of ancient Mesopotamia. Among the thousands of clay tablets that have been recovered and translated are documents that record events dating back 240,000 years. One of these, the Sumerian King List, tells the story of a god, An, chief god of an extraterrestrial race called the Anunnaki, and his sons Enki and Enlil. It is clear from the texts and illustrations left by the Sumerians that at least some of these gods were reptilian in appearance. Reptilian statues and artifacts were also created by the ancient Ubaid people and discovered in what is now modern-day Iraq. It is Enki who gave the first people the fruit of the tree of knowledge and who later saved humanity by warning a Noah-like figure of the Great Flood. These stories are so similar to the Old Testament that one can only conclude that the Old Testament authors borrowed heavily from them. In the Sumerian tale, Enki is given the task of creating a worker force to help the Anunnaki till the soil and mine the ore for which they came to Earth. This he does through considerable trial and error, in the process creating strange creatures. The legend implies that Enki possessed a highly advanced technology that included the capability of genetically altering the indigenous species. Using a mysterious process to create a clay-like substance, he was able to bind upon the image of the gods, indicating that Enki used Anunnaki genes to create a hybrid species. It also implies that some of the early humans may have had a reptilian appearance. References to reptilian Anunnaki watchers, good and bad angels, and hybrid babies can be found in many ancient texts, including the Old Testament, which borrowed much from older documents, including the Book of Enoch. The prophet Enoch is mentioned in Genesis as the son of Cain and the father of Methuselah. He is believed to be one of the antediluvian patriarchs who, along with Noah, walked with God. Books written by anonymous writers but credited to Enoch were given the great credence by early Jewish scholars. Parts of the Book of Enoch, written in Aramaic, were found among the scraps of parchment in the caves of Qumran in 1947, having been placed there nearly 2,000 years ago by a Jewish sect known as the Essenes. These, of course, are the Dead Sea Scrolls. In one writing, the Book of the Watchers, we learn that the Watchers are angels and that they are good and bad Watchers. We are told that the Watchers are angels of the Lord, but in the case of wicked or bad angels, the science they teach turns wicked because of their sins. Their sin is that they permit their sexual appetite to dominate them. When the evil Watchers descend and behold the daughters of man, they began to corrupt themselves. When the sons of God saw the daughters of man, they could not restrain their inclination. These Watchers fall from grace with God when Enoch travels to heaven in physical form to testify against them. He tells God that the Watchers had begun to go unto the daughters of men so that they became impure. As punishment for the sins of the evil Watchers against humankind, God destroys humanity, including the hybrid race of beings who are the offspring of the humans and the Watchers, by causing a great flood. Huangdi, or the Yellow Emperor, was the first Chinese emperor who ruled between 2697 to 2598 BC. He was said to descend to the earth in the belly of a dragon to help unify the people. In fact, the first four rulers of China were called the Four Dragon Kings in Chinese mythology. They were divine rulers of the four seas, also representing the four cardinal directions. They were said to be reptilian in appearance and also had the ability to shapeshift. The Chinese, Korean, and Japanese speak throughout their history of Long, Yang in Korean, and Ryu in Japanese, or dragons, conceived of both physical and non-physical forms. The Japanese have tales of the Kappa, a reptilian humanoid. A funny side note about the Kappa: in the third Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the four heroes travel back in time to feudal Japan. The Japanese villagers that encounter the turtles refer to them as Kappa. The lineage of humans from a race of dragons was often claimed by Asian emperors, who were believed to be able to change from human to dragon form at will, much like the modern concept of shape-shifting reptilians. In fact, to this day, the Chinese zodiac features 11 existing animals and one animal that comes from their so-called legends, all regarded as legit animals: the rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, pig, and dragon. The Mayans spoke and recorded history of a species of iguana men who descended from the sky, taking charge of their civilization. These beings taught them how to build their magnificent pyramids and even instructed them to arrange them in patterns reflecting the constellations. The legendary Mayan story of Cucmats speaks of serpents of wisdom enlightening the people and sometimes even devouring the young. These visitors could explain some of the ancient astronaut theories and images from inside the Mayan temples depicting the Mayan king Pakal ascending in his rocket ship. Kukulkan was a major Mayan deity, the feathered serpent, also known as Quetzalcoatl by the earlier Toltec people from that region. The Great Pyramid of Cholula, the world's largest pyramid by volume, located in Mexico, was built to honor Quetzalcoatl. In pre-Columbian mythology, Bachu, the primordial woman, transforms into a big snake. She is also sometimes called Serpiente Celestial. Many users of the drug dimethyltryptamine, the active ingredient in many South American shamanic potions such as ayahuasca, have seen reptilian humanoids or reptilian disincarnate entities while hallucinating. The Ohio Serpent Mound is located along the Ohio Brush Creek in Adams County, Ohio. It was built sometime before 1200 BC by the Allegheny people, also known as Allegheny. The Serpent Mound was thought to be an ancient burial mound arranged after the constellation Draco, where some say these reptilian beings originate from. The Hopi Indians of northern Arizona believe in two original races, the children of the feather, who came from the skies, and the children of the reptile, who came from inside the earth. These undergrounders were referred to as Two Hearts, a race of reptilian humanoids called Shetty, translated Snake Brothers. John Rhodes, an active researcher of reptilian origins, has spoken to many tribal chiefs about this matter. Both Apache and Hopi tribal leaders spoke to him of the reptilians having underground bases and assisting the tribes in times of crisis. Underground cities of the reptilians are said to exist under parts of Arizona, California, and Mexico. The Zuni tribe, the Cherokee tribe, as well as other Native American tribes also hold a belief in reptilian beings or gods that came to Earth long ago. In Western Africa, the legend of the rainbow serpent, Da, says the world was created by Nana Baluku, the one god, whom Da carried in its mouth to accomplish this process of creation. After the creation of the world, Nana Baluku asked Da to coil beneath the earth to help support its mass. The Dogon people of Mali, who are claimed to be descendants of the ancient Egyptians, believe their gods, the Nomo, or the beings known as Oans, were from the Sirius constellation. They are either fish-like, amphibious, or reptilian, quite scaly in appearance. Strangely, the scaly fish-head appearance of the Oans closely resembles the Pope's hat. The Zulu tribe in South Africa believe in a reptilian species known as the Chitauri or Chitari, creatures who feed on human beings, their blood and life force. They also claim the Chitari created Africans and used them to work their gold mines, extremely similar to the accounts described in the Sumerian tablets. They hide in deep cavities underground. They were also known as Zuswazi and Imbulu. The last living Zulu shaman, Credo Mutwa, is a strong proponent of the Chitari reptilian belief. He owns an ancient Zulu artifact, a bronze necklace with various sculptures dangling from it. Some of these images include a flying saucer-type image and a human female sculpture alongside a reptilian Chitari creature with an erect penis. The penis actually fits into the woman's sculpture, alluding to the Anunnaki creation myth seen in various cultures yet again. The Watusi and Hutu tribes call these reptilian Imanujela, or the ones who came. They feed off intense negative energy, much like the massive killings between the two tribes in Rwanda. The ancient Egyptian god Sobek was portrayed as a man with the head of a crocodile. In a play on words, the popular beverage company, Sobe, uses lizards and reptilian imagery on its labels and its commercials.
Whoa. Hey, Joe. You seeing what I'm seeing? You look good, man. You look real good.
In Islam, there is a belief in the jinn, more commonly known as genies. The jinn were said to exist in a realm just outside our own existence and would cross over into our world at times to meddle in our affairs. In the Middle East, reptilian beings ranging from certain types of jinn to dragons and serpentmen have been spoken of since ancient times. In one of the apocryphal books, purporting to be the lost book of Joshua, a serpent race is described. In the book of Genesis, God punishes the serpent for deceiving Eve into eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge by decreeing, "Upon thy belly thou shalt go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of your life." Traditionally, many have felt this implied that the serpent had legs before then. Thus, it is therefore often portrayed in Western art as a humanoid with a snake's tail, and sometimes lizard-like feet, as in a detail from Bosch's Last Judgment. In Australia, the Aborigines speak of a reptilian race that lives underneath the earth and governs over men. The Aborigines have spoken of going into the earth where these beings reside. There, they claim there is extensive technology. The Aborigines say that they are descended from a race of dragon humans that once lived in an enormous continent that spanned the entire Pacific Ocean, and that most of it sank beneath the waves in ancient times, but that Australia is a remnant of it, and this is why there are so many reptilian animals there. They also hold that an astral dream time exists outside of physical reality, which is the foundation of physical reality. Crocodile spirits and other reptilian entities inhabit this dream time and can be summoned through vibrational sounds such as the didgeridoo. Jormungandr, alternately referred to as the Midgard serpent, is a sea serpent of the Norse mythology, the middle child of Loki. According to Norse mythology, Odin tossed Jormungandr into a great ocean that encircles Midgard. The serpent grew so big that he was able to surround the earth and grasp his own tail, and as a result, he earned the alternate name of Midgard serpent or world serpent. Slavic folklore often mentions serpents and serpent people as the guardians of treasure and hidden cities in underground caves. Cecrops, the legendary first king of Athens, was said to have been half man, half snake. The ancient Titans were sometimes depicted as winged human-like figures with serpents for legs, as well as the Greek giant Clytios. Boreas, Aquilon to the Romans, was the Greek god of the cold north wind described by Pausanias as a winged man with serpents for legs. There are also the Lamia, a child-devouring female demon from Greek mythology depicted as half woman, half serpent. Another notable serpent reptilian figure from Greek mythology was that of Medusa, half serpent, half woman, with dozens of snakes for hair. There is a figure named Zahak from Zoroastrian mythology who grows a serpent on either shoulder. Huang Di, the first dragon emperor of China mentioned earlier, was also depicted wearing great suits of armor with snakes on his shoulders as well. A Givre is a mythical creature similar to a dragon. In legends, they were portrayed as serpentine creatures who possessed venomous breath and prowled the countryside of medieval France. The European dragon dates back to ancient depictions of various archaeological artifacts. An early instance in literature was the dragon that guarded the Golden Fleece in the voyage of the Argonauts. In the Middle Ages, tales of dragons seem to have become even more common. From the Middle Ages down to modern times, the devil was often conceived as a humanoid with reptilian characteristics, as were demons in general. But the New Testament reference of Revelation 12:9, which identifies the serpent of Genesis as Satan himself, gives insight from another angle. The serpent in the Garden of Eden was Satan, a supernatural being, either called a serpent symbolically, or because he manifested himself commonly in a dragon or serpent-like form. Buddhists and Hindus from India, Tibet, Indonesia, China, Burma, Cambodia, and Thailand believe in the Nagas, who often appear as serpents or half human, half serpent. Some are alleged to turn fully human. These beings were said to dwell within the earth and are usually considered to be malevolent towards humans. In some versions of the Naga legends, these These beings were said to have once lived in a continent in the Indian Ocean that sank beneath the sea. Indian texts also refer to a reptilian race called the Sarpa. The Sirikte of India were a tribe of men with snake-like nostrils in place of noses and bandy serpentine legs. To this day, the dragon or serpent signifies divine heritage and royalty in many Asian countries, while in the West, the serpent represents wisdom and knowledge. There are so many examples of serpent, dragon, and reptilian mythology throughout the world that one can no longer assume it's merely a coincidence. How could such a large number of ancient cultures, separated by vast oceans, all have similar tales and beliefs of reptilian entities? Some say that reptilian myths and symbolism exist in the human psyche due to the survival instincts and memories of the reptilian brain, left over from prehistoric stages of human evolution. Though the reptilian brain plays a part in all this, I tend to think there is more to it than just that. For the sake of time, here are just a few more examples I found.
Buddha of compassion.
Human feet may not look reptilian once babies emerge from the womb, but during development, the appendages appear similar to prehistoric fish and reptiles. The finding supports the theory that mammalian feet evolved from ancient mammal-like reptiles that in turn evolved from fish. It also suggests that evolution follows distinct patterns. In this case, the evolution of mammalian feet from fish fins to four-legged reptiles to four-limbed mammals to human feet appears to roughly mirror what happens to a maturing human embryo. In 33-day-old human embryos, scientists observed the outline of a lower extremity in the form of a fin, similar to that seen in osteolithiform fishes. As the embryo continued to develop, the researchers focused their attention on two foot bones, the calcaneus or heel bone, and the talus, which sits between the heel and the lower leg. At 54 days of gestation, these two bones sit next to each other as they did within the reptile herbivore Boreas cynops, which lived around 260 million years ago. This ancient reptile had flat, crushing teeth and mammalian features. At 8.5 weeks of gestation, researchers found the two embryonic foot bones resemble those seen in the Diademodon, which lived around 230 million years ago. As ridiculous as this sounds, it is commonly accepted by modern science that humankind's early ancestors may have been reptiles. According to the Darwinian explanation of the origins of the human species, mammals evolved from reptiles and gained dominion over the earth only after a great disaster of debatable nature destroyed the dinosaurs. It is theorized that only then were mammals able to proliferate and ultimately evolve into intelligent beings. It is rather remarkable that the ancient Sumerian story of creation should parallel so closely the Darwinian view. In both cases, humans are said to be related to a superior reptilian race, and in both cases a great cataclysm eradicates the earlier species. In his book, The Dragons of Eden, the esteemed astronomer Dr. Carl Sagan speculates on the reptilian origins of humans and on the mysterious leap in brain evolution that can be found in the fossil record. He notes that if people had evolved naturally from reptiles, as Darwinists claim, it should have taken 200 million years for mammals to first evolve, and then another 5 to 10 million years for humans to evolve. And he notes with extreme puzzlement that the fossil record simply does not bear out his conclusion. In fact, the evolution of mammals, and particularly humans, was accomplished very quickly in a major burst of brain evolution. Evidence for this is clear in the fact that stone tools do not appear gradually, but rather they appear in enormous abundance all at once. In frustration, Sagan concludes that there is no way to explain this unless Australopithecines had educational institutions to teach toolmaking. Of course, there is another explanation, but not one mainstream scientist would dare consider, and that is to admit that God or godlike beings had a hand in accelerating the evolutionary process. In Mr. Sagan's book, it is emphasized that in our search for evolution of human intelligence, it is extremely important that we do not ignore the most ancient part of the human brain upon which all other segments are but additions. According to the neuroanatomist Paul MacLean, the ancient area of the triune brain is driven by another prehistoric region that some neuroanatomists call the R complex, the R standing for reptilian. It is referred to as the R complex because we share it with reptiles. Mr. Sagan carefully points out the fact that the human brain develops from the inside out, an evolutionary sequence. First, the neutral cassis, which regulates the heart, blood, and respiration. Then secondarily, and most importantly, the R complex, which is the primordial evidence of intelligence. The limpid system is thought to generate love, hate, compassion, and sentimentality, characteristics believed to be strictly mammalian. The largest part of the human brain, the neocortex or outer layer, is believed to be the home of reasoning and deliberation, and the place where we know the difference between good and evil. The limbic system and the neocortex are later additions to the central core. MacLean also states that the R complex plays an important role in aggressive behavior, territoriality, ritualism, and establishment of social hierarchies. Most of our behavior as human beings is ruled by this archaic region of the brain. As Mr. Sagan himself so eloquently phrases it, it does no good whatsoever to ignore the reptilian component of human nature, particularly our ritualistic and our hierarchical behavior. On the contrary, the model may help us understand what human beings are all about. He mentions how much of our behavior is even expressed in reptilian terms, such as cold-blooded killer, or that shady, deceptive people are referred to as snakes. Also that the common human sounds commanding silence or attracting attention being that of a hissing snake. It's kinda eerie that someone who understands the reptilian part of the brain so well is named Sagan, because his name spelled backwards is that of the mythical East Indian reptilian gods, the Nagas. Carl Sagan goes on to puzzle over the similarities between the reptilian brain and the human brain. He points out that at the core of the human brain lies a vestige of our reptilian past. Once again, science seems to agree with the ancient creation myths, for it was the knowledge of good and evil given to them by a serpent that caused the first woman and man to fall from grace with the Creator. If the Creator was reptilian, then it could be that by becoming mammalian and developing a neocortex, humanity becomes less reptilian, thus falling from grace. I repeat the words of cosmologist Carl Sagan: there are more potential combinations of DNA than there are atoms in the universe. Far from it being impossible for such a race to emerge, it would be more surprising if it had not. At least 5 human behaviors originate in the reptilian brain. In human activities, they find expression in obsessive-compulsive behavior, personal day-to-day rituals, and superstitious acts, slavish conformance to old ways of doing things, ceremonial reenactments, obeisance to precedents as in legal, religious, cultural, and other matters, and all matters of deception. Other traits of the R complex include arrogance, aggression, and the mindset of might is right and winner takes all. Racism comes from the reptilian brain and also deception, violence, and lustful sexual energy. The human brain is in 2 parts or hemispheres, the right brain and the left brain, connected by a mass of nerve fibers. The left side is rational, logical, and intellectual. It works closely with the physical senses and can be summed up by can I touch it, see it, hear it, smell it, or taste it, so it must exist. It communicates through spoken words and written language. The right brain is where we manifest imagination, intuition, instincts, dream states, and the subconscious. It is the artist, musician, and creative inspiration. It communicates through images and symbols, not words. The right side is also closely related to the R complex. All movies, television, and video games are a projection of the reptilian brain. Movies, television, video games, and so on are all undeniably dreamlike, not only in their presentation of symbolic reality, but also in that humans experiencing movies have the same brainwave patterns as when they are dreaming. Dreaming originates in the reptilian brain, although other parts of our brain are involved. The language of the reptilian brain is visual imagery. All communications transferred by reptiles are done so by visual symbolic representations, each having specific meaning.
I think most Americans feel that way, but what is still true is that there's still kind of a reptilian side of our brain, right? That part of our brain that if somebody looks different or sounds different, that there's a part of us that is cautious, and what we have to do is fight against that, and that's part of what.
In some cases of evolutionary throwback, the genetic chain of command sometimes forgets to continue onwards in their evolutionary reenactment, leaving some babies with actual tails. These caudal appendages, as they are called, form at the lower lumbar area and are generally hairless, although most of these cases are immediately removed by surgeons in order to protect the families from adverse ridicule. In some third world countries where surgery is unavailable, the children quickly adapt to their tails and live out normal lives. It is interesting to note that in some of these cases the tail wags during moments of excitation. The embryonic human has the tail as well. In the 3rd month of gestation, the spinal cord extends through the entire length of the embryo. With increasing age, the vertebral column and dura mater lengthen more rapidly than the neural tube. The caudal end of the spinal cord shifts to a higher level of the vertebral canal. There is a hypothesis that those who descend from the reptilian gods, such as Quetzalcoatl, had an Rh-negative blood factor. They actually postulate that Quetzalcoatl was a Viking, sole survivor of a sea exploration, or a Celtic person from a tribe of Dana, who descended from the ancient Anunnaki. Your Rh status describes whether or not you have a protein on the surface of red blood cells. If you don't have the Rh factor, you're considered Rh negative. If you have it, you're Rh positive. About 85% of people are Rh positive, though it varies by race. For African Americans, about 90 to 95% are Rh positive, and for Asians, the figure is 98 to 99%. Rh negative blood types are very rare, and it is considered a mutation of unknown origin which happened in Europe about 25 to 35,000 years ago. This group of people with high percentage of Rh negative blood were known as the Basques. They spread heavily into the area of what is now Spain, England, Ireland, and other parts of Europe. In more than 98% of cases, the red blood cell incompatibility involves the rhesus or Rh negative factor. So the disease is known as the rhesus disease or Rh disease. Although the exact percentage varies with race, 15% of the United States population is Rh negative and 85% is Rh positive. Rh negative women with an Rh negative partner are at risk of spontaneous miscarriage and other fetus rejection events. Rh negative women and men have several unusual traits that Rh positives don't. Some call them reptilian traits. Some are born with the tail or caudal appendage as mentioned earlier. Other Rh negative reptilian traits include unusually low body temperature, lower than normal blood pressure, higher mental analytical abilities, higher negative ion shielding from positive charged viruses and bacteria around the body, high sensitivity to EM and ELF fields, hypervision, and other senses. The research of R. Frank from the University of Iowa suggests that the Basques were far advanced in navigational skills and other aspects of technology long before the rise of the Roman Empire. The Basques, she believes, are the last remnants of the megalith builders who left behind dolmens, standing stones, and other rock structures all across Europe and perhaps even in eastern North America. Two facts set the Basque peoples apart from the other Europeans who have dominated the continent for the past 3,000 years. The Basque language is distinctly different, and the Basques have the highest recorded level of Rh negative blood, roughly twice that of most Europeans, as well as substantially lower levels of type B blood and a higher incidence of type O blood. Some of the technological feats accomplished by the Basques or their ancestors include Stonehenge and similar megalithic structures, a unique system of measurement based on the number 7 instead of 10, 12, or 60, regular visits to North America long before Columbus to fish and to trade for beaver skins, and the invention of a sophisticated navigational device called an abacus, though it had no relation to the common abacus. The Rh negative blood factor is yet another plausible point in the reptilian case. This blood type alone has many reptilian traits. The story of the Basque people and their incredible feats throughout history mirrors the Anunnaki bloodline theme once again.
Anunnaki.
The first Troodon fossils were discovered in Montana in 1856. Very few have been discovered since then, and the small dinosaur was of little importance to paleontologists until the 1980s when Dale Russell, curator of vertebrate fossils at the National Museum of Canada, made a startling discovery. Most dinosaur brains were so tiny that they didn't even fill their brain cavities. Russell discovered that Troodon's brain was so large that it left imprints on the interior of its skull. Troodon was a very intelligent predator that hunted at night and had semi-manipulative fingers, able to grasp and hold objects and binocular vision. Troodon came from the theropod family and was a cousin to the T-Rex. The animal was around 5 feet tall, under 100 pounds, with a 7-inch long brain. A Stegosaurus, 40 times larger than Troodon, had a brain that weighed about 2 ounces, while Troodon's brain was about 6 times larger. On the scale of intelligence between primitive creatures at the bottom and advanced humans at the top, Troodon placed higher than any other dinosaur and even higher than some primitive mammals. Russell's discoveries proved that dinosaur brain evolution had not reached its peak. Russell also discovered the early signs of brain folding within Troodon, something that increases in brains as they evolve further and further. A great example of this is the human brain. The complexity of Troodon's brain was fast approaching that of some modern-day birds and mammals. Since its eyes faced forward, it had more depth perception and the ability to see things three-dimensional, which aided in catching fast-moving prey. In terms of functional ability and intelligence, a great comparison for Troodon would be to that of a coyote: cunning, fast, agile, and very adaptive. It was thought that if Troodon hadn't suddenly disappeared from the planet, that it would have surely surpassed our ancestors, the primitive mammals, keeping them from further advancement as a species. In 1982, a group of scientists from NASA approached Dale Russell on a project dealing with the possibility of life on other planets. They asked Russell to calculate the odds that this life may be intelligent. As an example to work off of, Russell used the brain-to-body ratios of primitive species on Earth as they evolved through time. Before the disappearance of the dinosaurs, mammals and Troodon had similar body-to-brain proportions. Therefore, both had equal chances of becoming more highly evolved. Given another eon or two, Troodon would have evolved into a super-intelligent life form. Having millions of years for a head start, it would be farther advanced than human beings even are today. Using this new discovery, Russell created the model he dubbed the Dinosauroid. Humanoid in appearance, reptilian in biology.
The eyes are focused more directly toward the front than they are in the dinosaur, so it probably would have had stereoscopic vision, as we happen to. The face is shortened. It has hands which it uses as tools and feeding devices rather than a jaw. The backbone is vertical, the pelvis is rotated beneath it, and it is our feeling, especially in view of the tremendous success of our own species and the bioengineering that it represents, which is the wisdom of millions of years, derived from a creature, incidentally, which was like a shrew and four-legged. We feel that this is a expectable, viable body form in our thought experiment, and it's actually a creature that departed from an ancestor which was bipedal, had a hand that had an opposable finger in it, had partly stereoscopic vision, and indeed the dinosaur looks more like us than our own ancestors did.
It would have feet and hands similar to ours and the skin of a snake. It would have given live birth, as do some species of reptiles today. Since the creature would have no mammary glands, it would regurgitate solid food for its young. Russell came up with the Dinosauroid model by calculating how Troodon's skeletal structure would change over time if its brain were to grow to the size of our own. Russell also speculated that it would have required a navel, as the placenta aids the development of a large brain case. He also thought its language would have sounded somewhat like birdsong. Russell's speculation has been met with criticism from other paleontologists since the 1980s, many of whom point out that Russell's dinosauroid is overly anthropomorphic. Artists have used these new approaches to the original thought experiment to reinterpret the dinosauroid, going so far as to create dinosauroid cave art, which depicts sentient tool-using troodontids and pterosaurs painted using sticks and feathers. Considering that the disappearance of the dinosaurs is still a mystery to modern scientists, and the fact that some prehistoric species of reptile exist even to this day, who's to say that Troodon wasn't smart enough to go underground and survive the supposed cataclysm that wiped out the dinosaurs? If he did, he would be far more technologically advanced than human beings, capable of mastering the stars as well as deep oceans and caverns of the earth. The idea of a reptilian species secretly controlling the world wouldn't seem so far-fetched at that point. Kundalini is a Sanskrit word meaning either coiled up or coiling like a snake, and the term usually emphasizes a more serpent nature, such as serpent power or serpent energy. The caduceus symbol of coiling snakes is thought to be an ancient symbolic representation of Kundalini physiology, as well as the symbol for the coiled DNA strand, both of which we'll get to in a minute. The concept of Kundalini comes from the yogic philosophy of ancient India. The source text for the concept of Kundalini is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, written by Swami Svatmarama somewhere between the 12th and 15th centuries. Within a Western frame of understanding, it is often associated with the practice of contemplative or religious practices that might induce an altered state of consciousness, either brought about spontaneously, through a type of yoga, through psychedelic drugs, or through a near-death experience, and is also referenced with encounters with beings from other worlds and dimensions. The Kundalini phenomena is also associated with out-of-body experiences. The Ouroboros is an ancient alchemy symbol depicting a snake or dragon swallowing its own tail, constantly creating itself and forming a circle. It is the wheel of time, the alchemy wheel that manifests grid programs that give the illusion of linear time, allowing souls to experience emotions. The Ouroboros is also associated with Gnosticism and Hermeticism. It represents the cyclical nature of things, eternal return, and other things perceived as cycles that begin anew as soon as they end. In some representations, the serpent is shown as half light and half dark, echoing such symbols as the yin-yang, which illustrates the dual nature of all things, but more importantly, that these opposites are not in conflict. The serpent, or dragon eating its own tail, has survived from antiquity and can be traced back to ancient Egypt, circa 1600 BC. From there, it passed to Phoenicia, and then to the Greek philosophers, who gave it the name Ouroboros, or the tail devourer. In Norse mythology, the serpent Jormungandr, mentioned earlier, grew so large that it could encircle the world and grasp its tail in its teeth. In Hindu mythology, it is the dragon encircling the great tortoise which supports the 4 elephants that carries the world. The Ouroboros has several meanings interwoven into it. Foremost is the symbolism of the serpent biting and devouring its own tail. This symbolizes creation out of destruction, life out of death. The Ouroboros eats its own tail to sustain its own life, in an eternal cycle of renewal. Alchemically, the Ouroboros is also used as a purifying glyph. Ouroboros was and is the name for the great world serpent encircling the earth. The caduceus is a winged staff with 2 snakes wrapped around it. It was an ancient astrological symbol of commerce and is associated with the Greek god Hermes, the messenger for the gods, conductor of the dead, and protector of merchants and thieves. Hermes was also known in ancient Egyptian lore as Thoth, the author of the Emerald Tablet and the figurehead for alchemy. In some cases, depictions of the Greek Kyriakian can be radically different from that of the traditional Caduceus. These representations will feature the two snakes atop the wand, crossed to create a circle with the heads of the snakes resembling horns. In this form, it looks remarkably similar to the symbol for the planet Mercury, while Mercury is the Roman name for Hermes, who carries the caduceus. In the 7th century, the caduceus came to be associated with the precursor of medicine, based on the Hermetic astrological principles of using the planets and stars to heal the sick. As the symbol for medicine, the caduceus is often used interchangeably with the rod of Asclepius, a single snake crossing a rod with no wings. This symbol of the one snake eventually evolved into the dollar sign. Some medical organizations join the serpents of the caduceus with rungs to suggest a DNA double helix. Dragons and snakes in the form of the caduceus and others are symbols for human DNA. Fire representing soul sparks of light emanating from the flame of creation. Dragons are winged beings portrayed in the ancient mythologies of most cultures. They link with winged gods from the heavens who came to earth to create the human race and are very important symbology in the creational blueprint of our reality. The symbol's origins are thought to date to as early as 2600 BC in Mesopotamia, started by the Anunnaki creation myths, and there are also several references to caduceus-like symbol in the Bible, namely in the Book of Numbers and Kings. Artifacts depicting a rod with two intertwined snakes winding around a central axis came from Mesopotamia in 2200 BC, and a similar image from Crete in 700 BC was also discovered. Reptilian symbolism is so rampant throughout history that its influence has now slithered its way into modern society. Over the ages, reptilian symbols started appearing across the globe, from architecture to art and sculptures, to certain terms as previously mentioned. And most astonishingly, it has crept into a lot of corporate logos, perhaps indicating something more sinister. Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is an initiatory society devoted to spiritual, philosophical, and magical development. The ideas studied by the Golden Dawn initiates are a unique combination of Jewish Kabbalah, ancient Egyptian, and Greek mysteries, several strands of Christianity, and many other Western esoteric traditions. The Golden Dawn was founded in 1887 by 3 British Freemasons, Mathers, Woodman, and Westcott, and it admitted hundreds of men and women over the next several decades. The original Golden Dawn generated a body of esoteric knowledge about ceremonial magic, divination, alchemy, and philosophy that is unparalleled to this day. The Golden Dawn has been a profound influence on the lives of artists, musicians, and writers. The society contains a great deal of Masonically derived symbolism, but has no supposed formal connection with Freemasonry or any of its appendant bodies. Some famous members include the occultist Aleister Crowley, Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula, which was based on Vlad the Impaler, member of the Brotherhood of the Dragon, Arthur Edward Waite, writer and creator of the A.E. Waite Tarot Deck, the poet W.B. Yeats, and the prophetic author Jules Verne, who wrote several science fiction books that actually foretold some future scientific achievements in the study of marine technology and aerospace. One of his most popular books was Journey to the Center of the Earth. Written in the 1800s, the book covers the topic of reptilians and dinosaurs living within the inner Earth. He actually used the real-life research of major hollow Earth proponents from his era and earlier back. The popular science context in which Verne wrote Journey to the Center of the Earth included notions of a hollow Earth consisting of inner spheres nested within each other and open at the poles. This idea was originally proposed by Edmund Halley in 1692, and again, closer to Verne's own time, by the American John Cleve Symmes of the U.S. Infantry. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym also explores these ideas in fiction. Verne was writing this work at the same time that Darwin's Origin of Species was being published in French translation. Instead of evolution, the primary debate of the day involved the antiquity of the world, the geological record versus a literist interpretation of Hebrew scripture. Hollow Earth theory always seems to propose a central sun and mythical subterranean cities and civilizations that some believe could link science and pseudoscience if physically discovered. According to the Hollow Earth hypothesis, planet Earth is either completely hollow or otherwise contains a substantial interior space. For the most part, the scientific community has dismissed the notion since at least the late 18th century. The concept of a hollow Earth is seen heavily in the folklore of many cultures. There are supposedly races that exist in subterranean cities beneath the planet Earth. As it goes, the dwellers of the world beneath are more technologically advanced than those on the surface. Some believe that UFOs are not from other planets, but are manufactured by strange beings in the interior of the Earth. The strange occurrence of UFOs often being seen over bodies of water or of actually coming out of lakes and oceans also contributes to that theory. In ancient times, the idea of subterranean realms seemed arguable and became intertwined with the concept of places, such as the Greek Hades, the Nordic Svartalfheim, the Christian Hell, and the Jewish Sheol, with details describing the inner earth in Kabbalistic literature, such as the Zohar and other books. In 1692, Edmund Halley put forth the idea of the Earth consisting of a hollow shell about 500 miles thick, 2 inner concentric shells, and an innermost core, about the diameters of the planets Venus, Mars, and Mercury. Atmospheres separate these shells, and each shell has its own magnetic poles. The spheres rotate at different speeds. Halley proposed this scheme in order to explain anomalous compass readings. He envisioned the atmosphere inside as luminous and possibly inhabited. He speculated that escaping gas caused the aurora borealis. In the late 18th century, Leonard Euler also proposed a hollow Earth idea, getting rid of multiple shells and postulating an interior sun 600 miles across to provide light to advanced inner Earth civilization. Sir John Leslie expanded on Euler's idea, suggesting 2 central suns named Pluto and Proserpine. This was unrelated to the former planet Pluto, which was discovered and named sometime later. Leslie did propose a hollow Earth in his 1829 book, Elements of Natural Philosophy. In 1818, Captain John Cleve Symmes suggested that the Earth consisted of a hollow shell about 800 miles thick, with openings about 1,400 miles across at both poles, with 4 inner shells, each open at the poles. Symmes became the most famous of the early hollow Earth proponents. He proposed making an expedition to the North Pole thanks to the efforts of one of his followers, James McBride, but the new President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, halted the attempt. Jeremiah Reynolds also delivered lectures on the hollow earth and argued for an expedition. Reynolds went on an expedition to Antarctica himself, but missed joining the Great U.S. Exploring Expedition of 1838 to 1842. Though Sims himself never wrote a book about his ideas, several authors published works discussing his ideas. McBride wrote Sims' Theory of Concentric Spheres in 1826. It appears that Reynolds has an article that appeared as a separate book in 1827. The Thule Society, which was well known by Adolf Hitler, reported much about Tibetan myths of openings into the earth. There is even a theory that Hitler ordered an expedition for such an opening in Antarctica, based on a speech of Admiral Donitz in front of a German submarine in 1944, when he claimed, "The German submarine fleet is proud of having built an invisible fortification for the Führer anywhere in the world." During the Nuremberg trials, Donitz spoke of an invisible fortification in the midst of eternal ice. As the story goes, Hitler and his followers wanted to create a race of super soldiers, an Aryan race based on the ancient Atlanteans to rule the world. They came to this conclusion through the acceptance of many occult beliefs and practices, including the hollow earth theory. There is a legend which says that Hitler and his chief advisors escaped the last days of the Third Reich by going through the opening at the South Pole, where they discovered an entrance to the Earth's interior. According to the Hollow Earth Research Society in Ontario, Canada, some of them are still there. After the war, the organization claims the Allies discovered that more than 2,000 scientists from Germany and Italy had vanished along with almost 1 million people to the land beyond the South Pole. This story gets more complicated with Nazi-designed UFOs, supposed Nazi collaboration with beings who live in the Earth, and possible explanation for Aryan-looking UFO pilots. In 2005, Stephen Curry Expeditions planned a voyage to the North Pole region to explore for a possible opening to the inner Earth. Brooks Agnew took over as leader after Curry's untimely death in 2006, with the plan of taking 100 scientists and filmmakers to the supposed Arctic opening in 2009. Unfortunately, after several hours of researching whether or not the 2009 expedition was ever carried out, the producers of this film came up empty-handed. They were unable to find information discussing anything more than the announcement of the rescheduling of the expedition in 2006 after Stephen's death. Time pressed, they were too busy to spend more effort looking into it. If anyone has new information about this, please let us know. Marshall Gardner wrote A Journey to the Earth's Interior in 1913. He placed an interior sun in the hollow Earth. He even built a working model of the hollow Earth and patented it. Gardner also took Captain John Cleve Sims to task for his ideas. In the same time, Vladimir Obruchev wrote a fiction novel called Plutonia, where the hollow Earth's interior possesses an inner sun and was inhabited by a prehistoric species. The interior was connected with the surface by a hole in the Arctic Circle. Other writers have proposed that reptilian entities and ascended masters of esoteric wisdom inhabit subterranean caverns or a hollow Earth. Antarctica, the North Pole, Tibet, Peru, and Mount Shasta in California have all had their advocates as the locations of entrances to the subterranean realm referred to as Agartha, with some even advancing the hypothesis that UFOs have their homeland in these places. In 1964, Raymond W. Bernard, an esoterist and leader of the Rosicrucians, published the lengthy titled Hollow Earth, the greatest geographical discovery in history made by Admiral Richard E. Byrd in the mysterious land beyond the poles, the true origin of the flying saucers. Bernard tells stories about the people who have entered the inner Earth and what has happened to them. It mentions a photograph published in 1960 in the Globe and Mail in Toronto, Canada, which shows a beautiful valley with lush hills. An aviator claimed that he had taken the picture while flying into the North Pole. In his book, Letters from Nowhere, Bernard claims to have been in contact with great mystics and great ashrams, and with Grand Lamas in Tibet. Dr. Bernard died of pneumonia on September 10, 1965, while searching the tunnel openings to the interior of the Earth in South America. Bernard seems to have accepted every legend ever associated with the Hollow Earth idea, including the notions that the Eskimos originated within the Earth and an advanced civilization dwells within even now, revving up their UFOs for occasional forays into thin air. Bernard even accepts without question the artist Richard Shaver's claim that he learned the secret of relativity before Einstein from the Hollow Earth people, of which we'll cover more shortly. Admiral Richard E. Byrd of the United States Navy flew to the North Pole in 1926 and over the South Pole in 1929. He referred to Antarctica as the land of everlasting mystery. In reference to the North Pole, he wrote, "I'd like to see that land beyond the North Pole. It is the center of the great unknown." In his diary, Byrd allegedly tells of entering the hollow interior of the Earth and traveling 17 miles over mountains, lakes, rivers, green vegetation, and animal life. He tells of seeing prehistoric animals moving through the brush. He even supposedly found cities and a thriving civilization. He also wrote about seeing a sun inside the Earth. Byrd also stated that the North and South Poles are only two of many openings into the center of the Earth. Several 20th century German writers, including Peter Bender, Johannes Lang, Karl Neupert, and Fritz Braun, published works advocating the hollow Earth hypothesis. The Egyptian mathematician Mustafa Abdelkader authored several scholarly papers working out a detailed mapping of the concave Earth model. Abstracts of two of Abdelkader's papers also appeared in notices of the American Mathematical Society in 1981 and 1982. One of the most controversial tales of the inner Earth dwellers is the so-called Shaver mystery. In 1945, Amazing Stories magazine ran a story told by the American writer and artist Richard Shaver, who claimed he had recently been the guest of what remained of a giant race called the Elder Race, an underground civilization that lived in caverns under the Earth. Shaver contended that the elder superior prehistoric race came to this planet from another solar system in our prehistoric past. After a time of living on the surface, they realized our sun was causing them to age prematurely, so they escaped underground, building huge subterranean complexes in which to live. Eventually, they decided to seek a new home on a new planet, evacuating the Earth and leaving behind their underground cities, a honeycomb of caves in the Earth. Majlis al-Jinn is the second largest cave chamber in the world, as measured by the surface area of the floor. It is located in a remote area of the Selma Plateau at 1,380 meters above sea level in Oman. This cave is known as the meeting place of the Jinn, consisting of a huge cavern with a series of tunnels deep below. Locals are very afraid of this place, and warn those that dare to enter the cave to think twice. Recently, the smaller area of the cave that was open to the public was suddenly shut down by the authorities. They stated it was too dangerous without any specifics. Agartha is a legendary city that is said to reside in the Earth's core. It is one of the most common names cited for the Society of Underground Dwellers. Shambhala, also known as Shangri-La, is sometimes said to be its capital city. The mythical paradise of Shambhala is known under many different names. It has been called the Forbidden Land, the Land of White Waters, the Land of Radiant Spirits, the Land of Living Fire, the Land of the Living Gods, and the Land of Wonders. Hindus have known it as Aryavartha, literally translated as the land or realm of the Aryans. It is also considered the land from which the Vedic scriptures come. The Chinese know it as the Western Paradise of Si Wang Mu, the Royal Mother of the West, and the Russian Old Believers, a 19th century Christian sect, knew it as the Belovadai, but throughout Asia it was best known by its Sanskrit name, Shambhala. Shambhala's concept figures prominently in Vajrayana Buddhism and Tibetan Kalachakra teachings, and revived in the Western thinking of Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society. As with many concepts in the Vajrayana Buddhism, the idea of Shambhala is said to have an outer, inner, and secret meaning. There are various ideas about where the society is located, but it is often placed in Central Asia north of Tibet. The purported entrances to the inner Earth realm of Agartha are the North and South Pole, Cueva de los Tallos, Ecuador, Gobi Desert, Mongolia, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Iguazu Falls, Argentina, Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, Manaus, Brazil, Mato Grosso, Brazil, Mount Epomeo, Italy, Mount Shasta, California, the Well of Sheshna in Benares, India. On March 12, 1909, a small article appeared in the Arizona Gazette newspaper announcing the arrival of a man by the name of G.E. Kincaid, who had just completed a Colorado River rafting trip from Green River, Wyoming. He stated that he had enjoyed his trip and planned on returning the following winter for another run at the Colorado River. He also mentioned his discovery of some interesting artifacts, which he had mailed to the Smithsonian Institute. On April 5, 1909, a front-page article appeared in the Arizona Gazette in which Kincaid is interviewed in detail about his archaeological find. This discovery of Kincaid, as notably remarked in the article, was to be considered the most significant archaeological find in the world throughout all history. Mr. Kincaid had apparently discovered a massive underground city that was cut into a wall of the Grand Canyon with a precision equaled only to that of the Great Pyramid. The highly advanced civilization that inhabited this subterranean city was of unknown origin, although several different artifacts were found, such as a Buddha statue, mummies, and hieroglyphics that carried Oriental, Egyptian, and Central American appearances. A Smithsonian Institution archaeological team was sent in, as the professional group headed by a Professor Jordan conducted explorations into the depths of this underground city. They discovered hundreds of rooms, some as small as the average living room, and others as large as several hundred feet in length and width. It was estimated that the area explored so far by the team could have comfortably housed 50,000 people. The location of this discovery was veiled in secrecy because, as Mr. Kincaid put it, they don't want to be disturbed. His only clues were that it was about 42 miles north of Crystal Creek in northern Arizona. After the completion of his interview and the printing of the story the next day in the Arizona Gazette, not a single thing was ever mentioned about it again publicly until the original article resurfaced again all these years later. The religion and myth of the Hopi Indian is based upon the worship of the snake. Their legend of Genesis also recounts how reptilians, or snake people, played an important part in their ancestry. Today the ancestors of the Hopi tribes are referred to as their snake brothers, or elder brothers, and the reverence toward the reptilian ancestors is evident throughout all ceremonies of the Hopi Indians. When their most sacred of all underground Kiva rituals are performed, that of the snake dance, rattlesnakes are present to hear their prayers. These snakes are then later released into the wilderness so they can return to the gods of the underworld with the tribe's prayers. According to the Hopi oral history, they used to live in the great subterranean underworld alongside a race of beings called the Ant People. These Ant People, which might by today's standards be considered the reptilians, helped feed and clothe the Hopi during their lives underground. One day, under the direction of their matriarchal goddess, they ascended to the surface by way of a hollowed chute which sprang forth through an opening in the ceiling of their cave called a Sipapuni. This so-called myth of the Hopi underworld and its inhabitants would be considered as others based upon fantasy and imagination if it wasn't for one solitary discovery that was made by a mysterious man traveling down the Colorado River aboard a skiff in the Grand Canyon more than 100 years ago. As you can see, the idea of reptilian beings and the hollow earth theory go hand in hand. The belief in inner earth realms has been around ever since the reptilian mythos began to appear in ancient cultures around the world. In fact, the idea of reptilians coming from out there rather than in here wasn't widely received until the notion of flying saucers came to be, followed by the theories of Zecharia Sitchin. All ancient cultures that believe in serpent and reptilian mythology also believe these creatures either originated from within the earth or that they came from the stars and have since made the hollow earth their home. Either way, they have been here for a very, very long time. The reality is, we really don't know what lies deep within our Earth. Scientists understand more about our moon than they do about our deep oceans and what lies within the almost 4,000 miles of our planet. Dinosaurs is a sitcom thought up by Jim Henson, which aired in 1991 on Disney's ABC network. The show is initially set in the year 60 million BC and centers on the Sinclair family, a a reference to Sinclair Oil Corporation, which uses a dinosaur as its logo. The main character, Father Earl Sinclair, is a reference to Harry F. Sinclair and Earl Holding, Sinclair Oil's principal owner since the 1970s. Harry Sinclair was a sportsman and industrialist who was also involved in the famous Teapot Dome scandal. The Scoto-Norman surname Sinclair comes from the clan Sinclair, whose progenitors conquered England with William the Conqueror and then moved to Scotland and were given the land of Roslin, Midlothian, by the King of Scotland. It is there the St. Clairs or Sinclairs built Roslin Chapel 150 years after the supposed disbanding of the Knights Templar in 1312. The layout of Roslin Chapel echoes Solomon's Temple from the Bible and is said to contain the Holy Grail, the Templar treasure, and the Templar secrets. The Knights Templar are said to have evolved into the Freemasons of modern day. The name Earl Sinclair is also a reference to the Earls of St. Clair, which came from this bloodline. Harry F. Sinclair, the founder of Sinclair Oil Corporation, is from the direct bloodline of the aristocratic Earls of St. Clair. Another strange connection from the Dinosaurs sitcom is that the grandmother dinosaur's name was Ethel Phillips, a reference to Phillips Petroleum or ConocoPhillips and Ethel Gasoline. Earl's job is to push over trees for the We Say So Corporation, alluding to the fact that petroleum comes from compressed trees and other organic matter like dead dinosaurs, keeping with the petroleum theme of the show. He works alongside his friend and co-worker Roy Hess. Hess Corporation is another regional petroleum chain. Another reference to petroleum companies is Earl's boss, named BP Richfield, alluding to British Petroleum, now well known for orchestrating the greatest environmental catastrophe of all time, and Atlantic Richfield, the original name of Arco. Oddly, if you see things in a different perspective, Arco's logo looks like a pyramid from the top view with its capstone missing, similar to the pyramid on the back of the American $1 bill. British Petroleum is owned by Dutch Royal Shell, as in the British royal family, which some conspiracy researchers claim is from the Reptilian Anunnaki bloodline. Also a funny note is that Earl's employer, the We Say So Corporation, uses a logo quite similar to DuPont Chemicals' traditional oval-shaped logo. ABC's Dinosaurs sitcom is awash with reptilian symbolism as well as other signs that allude to the global elite and their corporate control over the world and its resources. The fact is, there are many TV shows, movies, books, and games that make references to the reptilians and their existence on or within our planet. Here are some more examples of reptilian references within popular culture. Enoch is the intelligent, peaceful reptilian creature featured in the sci-fi adventure The Land of the Lost from General Electric's NBC network, airing from 1974 to 1977. Enoch fell through a time warp portal into a prehistoric landscape which he discovered was his own future, a future where his fellow race of Sleestaks have reverted into bow and arrow wielding primitives. With the realization that some past event would revert his people to savagery, he spent his days trying to get back to his own time and warn his race of their impending destiny. When the savage reptilian Sleestaks spoke, they hissed and slobbered. During the making of this film, the researchers also noticed that Enoch is an anagram for Enki, one of the original Anunnaki gods from the Sumerian texts. The main characters of the show, the Marshall family, entered the land of the lost when they were boating along the Colorado River and fell over a waterfall that was actually a time portal into a prehistoric world filled with dinosaurs and strange reptilians. This story is oddly similar to G.E. Kincaid's adventure on the mighty Colorado, which led him to discover an inner Earth world within the Grand Canyon. A movie version of this popular show starring Will Ferrell was released 3 years ago. In the movie Enemy Mine, Dennis Quaid's character gets stuck on a remote planet where he befriends a strange reptilian character called Drac, played by Lou Gossett Jr. The popular sci-fi series called V, which stood for Visitors, aired during the 1980s. The show is about an outwardly peaceful, but ultimately evil race of reptilians who seem to suddenly appear over the Earth in their spaceships, attempting to integrate with mankind. To the people on Earth, these aliens actually look like fellow humans, but it is really a disguise that hides their reptilian appearance. In the end, the few people that know the truth about the visitors realize these beings have been here on the planet for thousands of years, and their staged arrival is merely a final step in their plot to take over the planet. The V-Saga resurfaced again in 2009 on ABC with a new take on the old story of aliens taking over the world, and yes, they are still reptilian. There's a kind of corny but still relevant John Carpenter movie from the 80s called They Live. The film's characters aren't really reptilian looking, however, they do hide in human form and secretly control the world just like in V. The aliens assume the highest positions of power, much like David Icke's theories put forth in his books. These aliens work and live in underground bases, and the movie even shows an inner Earth galaxy, alluding to old hollow Earth theories about a solar system within the planet and the notion of interdimensional travel. It goes without saying that there are a lot of reptilians in the sci-fi culture. We have from Doctor Who, Kriz, there's also the Draconians, and Homo Reptilia. There's the Silurians. You also got from the show Doctor Who, Borax, the reptilian archaeologists. There's also the Pterodactyl, another strange reptilian. Once again from Doctor Who, there's the Robo-Reptilian Ice Warriors. From the series Star Trek, we got the Cardassians, a character named Gorn. Also from Star Trek, you can find the strangely reptilian race, Jem'Hadar. There's also the very reptilian-looking Voth from Star Trek Voyager. We found from the Star Trek Voyager, you have strange creatures called the repto-humanoids, and the reptilian race known as the Zindi, the Narn from Babylon 5. Also, they're the Drazi aliens. There's a fierce reptilian race from the Stargate television series called the Unas. There's also the Scarans from Farscape, and there's also a sinister reptilian race from Battlestar Galactica. There are characters called Trandashans from Star Wars. A major Trandashan character from the Star Wars movie was that of Bosk. In the sci-fi comedy Galaxy Quest, the main villain is the evil General Saris, who looks very reptilian. In 1999, there was a short-lived series on TV called The Lost World that was based on Arthur Conan Doyle's book, in which the explorers of the Lost World came across not only dinosaurs, but primitive reptilian humanoids. There was a brief TV series in the late 90s called Tarzan, The Epic Adventures. In 2 episodes, Kukulkan Khan and the Scarlet Diamond, Tarzan battles with reptilian humanoids. A few years ago, a total B-movie starring Daniel Baldwin was released titled Anonymous Rex. The storyline revolves around the idea that the dinosaurs never disappeared and instead went underground long ago. Over time, they reintegrated into society after humans evolved into our current state. The dinosaur creatures are disguised as humans with the aid of holograms. The sci-fi horror film from 1959 called The Alligator People, starring Lon Chaney. The film is about a mad scientist who mixes manipulated alligator genes with humans, creating strange reptilian humanoids. There's the 80s cult classic, another sci-fi horror starring Roddy Piper, called Hell Comes to Frogtown. When a sinister race of frog-faced reptoid aliens come to Earth, Roddy Piper's character has to kick some alien ass, just like in They Live. Hunter S. Thompson makes a reference to reptile people in his classic book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Upon entering the bar at a Las Vegas hotel while on LSD, the character sees everyone in the bar turn into lizards. David Icke also wrote of how he spoke to a man who was tripping on LSD for extended periods back in the day. After tripping on acid for so long, he began to see people change into reptiles. But not just anybody, only certain people, and always the same people. These were usually people in positions of power. In the hilarious 70s classic, Cheech and Chong's Nice Dreams, the comedy duo's pot supply gets raided by the local police. One detective, played by Stacy Keach, smokes all of the confiscated stash. After smoking a massive amount of the cosmic weed, the detective turns into a lizard. Another example is the 1966 horror film called The Reptile. In the film, a lady is changed into a human lizard after being cursed by a serpent-worshipping cult. In the film Dreamscape from the 1980s, the main evil villain from the film turns into a snake man. And who can forget the creature from the Black Lagoon, the amphibious reptoid that terrorizes anyone that it comes across. Disney has a cartoon called Jake Long, the American Dragon, in which the show's main character, Jake, can shapeshift between human and a dragon. Remember, the Chinese word for dragon is long. There's the popular comedy cartoon from the creator of The Simpsons called Futurama. Several episodes make a reference to the Pope, or rather Space Pope, being reptilian. The popular cartoon and movie series, The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, resembles the reptilian Kappa from Japanese legends as mentioned earlier. In the newer version of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the team comes up against the Tyrannodrones, evil reptilian foot soldiers. The villainous Lizard Man, and the hordes of Snake Men from the ever-popular 1980s He-Man cartoon. That one just happens to be one of my favorites, by the way. You also got Slith, the arch-enemy of the Thundercats. From the old Nickelodeon cartoon Rugrats, there's Reptar, Tommy's toy dinosaur that would occasionally come to life. There's also Prickle, the dino-humanoid buddy of Gumby. From the old Flash Gordon cartoon and action figures, there's the Lizard Women. Oh, and of course you can't leave out Barney and Friends, a colorful group of talking thunder lizards who the kids just love. And I happen to find it funny that Barney is purple, and purple is the color of British royalty, elite bloodlines who are claimed to have come from the reptilian Anunnaki. Also from the popular anime cartoon Dragon Ball Z, there's the Namekians, a reptilian-looking race that created the 7 Dragon Balls. Also, in the mid to late 80s G.I. Joe cartoon, the main villain was known as Cobra. He speaks with a strange hiss, and underneath his mask is the face of a snake. In the more recent G.I. Joe Action Force animated movie, the storyline is about a reptilian race that lived on the surface of the Earth long ago, but was forced underground due to the coming Ice Age. Over time, man evolved into the current state with wondrous technology, and now the reptilian race has returned to the surface to battle the humans for their control.
This is the fishing boat Reptilian. Put me through to the Coast Guard. Hurry, please. This is an emergency. I wish to report a mysterious...
Miguel! What is it? Miguel?
Éramos 4 adolescentes como cualquier otro. Hasta que un día conocimos nuevos amigos en las afueras de la ciudad. Se hacían llamar dinoplatívolos. Mis compañeros y yo formamos el Dino Escuadrón Secreto en alianza con los dinoplatívolos del espacio exterior. Y nos unimos todos en la batalla contra Genji Rex y sus malvados tiranos.
Los dinoplatívolos están escapándose, jefe Rex.
¡Sígalos, Caspero!
Ay, 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 ay.
¡Dinoplatívolos!
distant planet Valoria, Questar and his people were forced into battle. The power of their step crystal ripped a hole in the fabric of time, sending them backward to prehistoric Earth. Unaware that at the same moment the evil Emperor Krulos was plotting to capture the step crystal with his own grotesque Rulon forces. And so, the battle continues in a new place and time with Dino Riders.
We also have in Marvel Comics, there's the Spider-Man's nemesis, the Lizard, Stegron. There are also the Skrulls, an alien race of reptilian shapeshifters. Badoon, another hostile reptilian alien race. Slither, he's a snake-like mutant and an ally of Magneto. And there's also a race called Clegs, alien mercenaries, in the Judge Dredd universe. There's also Killer Croc, an enemy of Batman. The character Thulsa Doom from Conan the Barbarian. In role-playing and video games, you have the Argonians, a race in the game franchise The Elder Scrolls. Banga, a race of serpent reptilians in the Final Fantasy games. From the Legend of Zelda video game and cartoon, there's the evil lizard being named Lizalfos. From the popular third-person shooter game Unreal Tournament, you have the reptilian character Scarge. We also have Slagra, a reptilian level boss from the game Castlevania. There is the character Lizard Man from the fighting game series Soul Calibur. From the Donkey Kong Country game for Super Nintendo, there's the crocodile humanoid Kremlings. From the role-playing card game Magic the Gathering comes the powerful reptilian race called the Viashino. We also have a race of lizardmen seen again in the RPG fantasy game Age of Wonders. And Drell, a race in the Mass Effect series. There's also lizard folk, kobolds, and Wong Ti from Dungeons & Dragons. We have Reptile, a very notorious character from the Mortal Kombat series. Also Riptor, character from the fighting video game Killer Instinct. There's the first-person shooter series called Turok, which took place in a Lost World scenario where you must fight against dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures as well as more intelligent reptilian humanoids. And probably most notorious of all, Bowser from the Super Mario Bros. Series of video games. Also, in the film adaptation of Super Mario Bros., Bowser, or King Koopa as he goes by in the movie, is played by Dennis Hopper. In the strangely different movie version, Koopa appears as a human but has the ability to change into a dinosaur. In literature, we find reptilians in the form of Evra Vaughn from Darren Shan's Saga of Darren Shan. There's also the Lady of the Green Kirtle from C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair. The Race from Harry Turtledove's World War series. Serpentmen from the works of Robert E. Howard, also in Marvel Universe. We have Philip K. Dick, a science fiction writer, in his book Valis, wrote about contact with three-eyed amphibious beings from Sirius and their connection to the Soviets and the Illuminati. Dick also claimed to have connected these creatures to the Nomo, a race of amphibious deities worshipped by the Dogon tribe of Mali. Tom Robbins also included the reptilian theory in his fictional novel Half Asleep in Frog Pajamas. Incredible historical ties and amazing amount of backstory leads the reader through the entire gambit of reptilian lore. There's also Robert Anton Wilson, who writes about the Illuminati in the Illuminatus trilogy and other books. The book Cosmic Trigger 1, Final Secret of the Illuminati, describes his drug-induced experiences with three-eyed beings from Sirius. He is known for stating various forms of conspiracy theory. He also claims to be a high-level initiate of Aleister Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis. Timothy Leary also claimed to have contact with three-eyed beings from Sirius. The Marvel comic, The Ultimates, written by Mark Miller, used a conspiracy of shape-shifting alien reptiles as the primary villains of the Homeland Security archetype. Miller admits this idea was based on the beliefs of David Icke. Robert Howard, popularly known for his Conan stories, wrote The Shadow Kingdom, which featured shape-changing reptilian organisms. They could and did pass as hominids in the imaginary kingdom of Volusia. This story was published in Weird Tales, August 1929, and republished in the collection King Kull, 1967, by Lancer Books. I am the Lizard King. I can do anything. A famous quote from the Doors frontman Jim Morrison, who was deeply interested in the metaphysical. He was a fan of Carl Jung and a big believer in Native American mysticism. On stage at his concerts, he would imitate a shaman screeching, making animal sounds, and taking mind-expanding drugs. Most shamans became fascinated with one deity. Often in Native American shamanism, it would be a real animal. Jim Morrison was fascinated by the lizard. Morrison believed that the lizard embodied and symbolized a powerful force, the subconscious mind. His conception of the Lizard King has been interpreted by some as a recognition of a profound and transcendent spiritual reality, such as the achievement of nirvana. The Lizard King is meant allegorically. The symbol represents something dormant in all human beings and that which can be awoken by inward experience. The Lizard King isn't out there, it's within. Here is a reference to Morrison's quote in an episode of The Simpsons after Lisa drinks the contaminated water from an amusement park ride and begins to hallucinate.
We found this one swimming naked in the fermentarium.
I am the Lizard Queen!
The well-known insurance company, Geico, has an intelligent, civilized, British-sounding gecko as its mascot. The gecko is featured quite frequently in Geico's commercials. Geico also featured another popular character in its ad campaigns. The short-lived popularity of this character even sparked off a failed TV sitcom. Of course, I am speaking of the Geico caveman, an unevolved, ugly Neanderthal just trying to get by in modern society, but always seeming to fail. In a symbolic display, the Geico gecko represents a more evolved reptilian species who seems to have had a jump start in the evolutionary process. Farther advanced in the caveman, he doesn't seem to be at the stage in development that he should be. This echoes the Anunnaki creation myth seen repeatedly throughout history. The beverage company Sobe, as mentioned earlier, is a play on the words of the Egyptian crocodile god Sobek. Sobe has used the lizard motif with its products since day one, but over the past few years, its commercials have driven extra hard into the reptilian brains of consumers, applying extra doses of provocative sexual imagery. Sobe commercials also feature dancing lizards and people changing into lizards. This popular Sobe commercial we showed before shows a guy drinking the new Sobe Life Water, and then he begins to hallucinate. He even sees one of his co-workers turn into a lizard. The life water term seems to connect to the life oils that ancient Egyptian priests would rub on initiates, anointing them. In the tradition of the Egyptian god Sobek, this oil was made of melted fat of crocodiles and sometimes combined with hashish oil or other psychoactive plants and herbs, causing the initiates to hallucinate. As you can see, there are vast references to reptilian humanoids, serpent beings, and lizard people throughout movies, television, games, books, the media, and music. Whether laughed at or believed wholeheartedly, our myths and culture, spanning from the far past to the present, has become saturated with the notion of these types of beings. It's almost as if all mythical creatures from vampires to werewolves, monsters, trolls, and so on seem to be related to the existence of the reptilians. All are elusive, mischievous, or downright evil, and usually come from within caves, mountains, underground, or from underneath lakes and oceans. Now that we are living in this technological day and age, the idea has shifted from these kinds of mythical creatures to that of extraterrestrials. Could these Nephilim, gnomes, vampires, and all others really be interpreted as aliens, be they greys, reptilian, or otherwise? Many seem to think so, and so do I. Whether these reptoids are from another planet, or they originated here on Earth, they must have certainly been around for a very long time to have become so ingrained in the collective mind like they have.
Reptilians, 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 reptilians.
Well, you're familiar with the reptilian beings that experiencers encounter. They're described as tall, powerful, muscular, lizard-like, often with scales and a brow here and sort of a carapace on the chest. And sometimes they're said to not smell good. David Chase referred to them as an ancient warrior race, proud, willful, domineering, territorial, physically aggressive, deceptive, emotionally manipulative, sexually intrusive, and potentially cruel. Their craft are Spartan, functional environments. In spite of their bad side, they also show a strong sense of duty and technical ability, and one reptilian was described as compassionate. So I'm just going to quickly tell you a few of the cases that I've had, people that have had reptilian encounters. Start with Greg. Now, Greg is a physician in his 50s, and he has had a lifelong battle with his reptilian beings. They seem to struggle with him for his soul. It's hard to know exactly how this began with him, but he felt that certain reptilian beings were out to destroy him, seemingly out of a motive of revenge. They would do this by invading his soul and sucking the life energy out of me, out of my soul. It was unbelievably terrifying. He resisted these beings intensely, for he felt certain that his life had a purpose and that he must deal with this darkness and not suffer at the expense of it. But through this struggle, he discovered that the light is much stronger and the battle was actually empowering and even enlightening. He felt a compassion for their pain and didn't want to lose a total connection with them. I think I want in some way to participate in their getting in touch with their souls. He said of them, I don't love what they do to me, I do care for them. And Karen, who I wrote about in Passport, came upon in one of our sessions, we had many, many sessions, but she, for the first time, encountered what she described as encounters with ugly, scaly, lizard-like beings that seemed in some ways to represent her struggle with some reptilian energies of her own. But then I spoke with a native woman, a Peruvian shaman, about her encounters, and she said, in contrast to our kind of Judeo-Christian relationship to the reptilian beings, she said that the serpent energy was an energy that she could enter into fully because she felt one with it. One of my people I've worked with who studies shamanism described an encounter with an anaconda like snake, and it twirled and twirled and twirled, and then it became like she was inside of a spaceship. So it was like her encounters with the reptilians was much more of a kind of spiritual connection. I was struck by Dan McAvoy's comment that the blood samples they took from this being that Jonathan Reed, I don't know whether you believe it or not, but he did say that the blood samples had a kind of human and reptilian nature to the genome that was discovered there. There is a huge range of attitudes that people have toward the reptilian beings. On the whole, they don't have a good reputation. Here's Donna, who I've worked with for several years, who tends to have a somewhat victim-like relationship to all of her experiences in her world, but she described this great distress, an encounter with these beings, reptilian beings in a cave, lizard-like beings with the green, with the scaly ones with a very thick, a big snout and a thick, hard chest, and she described at one point like a little dinosaur, like a little T-Rex, very vicious. One of them tried to rape her, she said, and she described it as like, those Japanese dragon-type lizards, she said. And she said that in addition to trying to rape, she saw them eating babies. It was horrible. I mean, her description. I've also worked with people who feel that they are in some way identified with this race of beings, that they represent an ancient race that they are somehow part of or connected with or were once connected with. Paul described his own identification with an ancient race of reptilian beings who were compassionate and understanding, who were able and he was able. They were akin to the dinosaurs on the Earth and had some relationship with them. Now, Dana is a entertainer, now in her early 50s, who has had a very powerful sexual contact with a reptilian being, which was in no way, she was scared at first, but it was an ecstatic experience. It was a powerful connection for her, and it represented for her, she discovered in a sense in this her own warrior energy. She said it was almost as if he were a part of myself who I was meeting in that exchange, that sexual exchange, as if my own energy were incarnated in that fierce warrior, and I was really making love with a different reptilian aspect of myself. I feel as if my energy is distinctly reptilian, bold, and warrior-like. She actually has written a manuscript which isn't published, which is one of the reasons I don't want to identify her. Some of you might be able to, but she's talked about a reptilian hierarchy. She's very familiar with this whole area. There's a huge dragon-like figure she calls Draco, which is the Greek word for dragon, that is 15 feet tall, has wings, takes her up, and he's really far out, right? I mean, this is beyond what even I could go, but she's a person of very solid sound mind. She's also had encounters with other more delicate snake-like beings, and she's played a role as a diplomat, as kind of leader of a sort of snake tribe that makes peace among the reptilians. She described a friend of hers who had a reptilian relationship, a guy she calls Mick, and he apparently confronted one of these alien beings. He said, "Man, you're ugly." And the alien said, "You should see what you look like to us." Now, she has had herself a very powerful connection with an alien race that became extinct. Now, Barbara Lamb, where are you, Barbara? Barbara is here. Barbara has done regression with this person, and I want her to tell you about, because her relationship with this race came out in this regression. So, Barbara, would you come up and join me here?
Just a few years ago, and I had the great privilege and pleasure and fascination of regressing Dana to this experience. And I had known that she had had experiences with them in this life, including some of the sexual experiences. So we just didn't know what we were going to go into when we did the regression. But basically the question that we asked, or the issue that we focused on in doing the regression, was what is her connection originally, or that is, what is the source of her connection with these reptilian beings? And in the regression, she went to a whole scene which she sensed was a long, long time ago. She thought it seemed like it might be another planet just because of the coloration of the ground and the sky and so forth. And in this regression, she was a reptilian being. She was a male, and she was strong, as John described it. She was strong and husky and powerful and proud and straight, and she was the leader of a reptilian group of males. And in this particular happening, she was standing on top of a tall bluff with a whole troop of these reptilian beings around her, and they were looking forward in a certain direction, off into the distance, and they could see that there was a huge wave of heat and colored light, red, yellow light coming toward them. They knew it was disaster. She didn't know if it was a nuclear blast or just what it was, but they knew that they were facing the end. And the magnificent thing about this was that instead of their buying into fear, as most of us would do and running around, they stood firm. They linked arms, they linked consciousness with their minds. They had total telepathic communication. And she led them in having agreement that they would stand firm and receive the energy of this terrific wave of destruction.
What are the ways we might think about these encounters? This gets into the example of illustration of what I've been talking about earlier on in the lecture. There's the literal, and I'll take each of these individually, the literal, individual psychological way of looking at it, biology, the phylogeny, that is going back where we came from originally, collective unconscious, symbolic, physical, myths and religion, or some combination of the above.
It's not just Mesopotamia. That's a good place to start, you know, because those are the earliest. That's where the earliest written records, human written records, are found, and the earliest civilization. But also the civilizations, the ancient civilizations in India, in Mesoamerica, South America, China. All of those areas, when you dig into their ancient histories, you find references to flying serpents and dragons. Basically, I'm skipping a few steps, but a lot of places they're just called serpents, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here.
No, I know what you mean, like Quetzalcoatl.
That's a good example, because the god of the Aztecs, of the Mesoamericans, of the Mayans that came before them, his name means flying serpent. And if you look into the history, not only in Mesoamerica, but back in in Sumer and in the Middle East there, and in China and India, you find a lot of references to these, at least flying serpents, which are interpreted to mean that, first of all, these gods, or whatever they were in fact a reptilian race, and that they flew around in some sort of craft. These type of references, like I said, are found throughout the world, and that's what really interested me and my wife Lynette in the early 90s. There are extraordinary things. There have been extraordinary things going on here, and it's something like that. I wouldn't put it past having happened here. It's my understanding that it's not so much that the reptilians themselves. First of all, it's my understanding, it's our understanding that they are able to move into the next dimension, beyond the third dimension, very easily, which we're not even aware of, or hardly aware of, most of us. And so from there, it's very easy for them to manipulate, or not easy for them, but at least easier for them to manipulate as poor, ignorant humans from this dimension. In other words, they're I don't know what you'd say, metaphysically more advanced in many ways, and they're reported to be very intelligent from an intellectual point of view, very intelligent, but just lacking some in some consciousness, spiritual consciousness, higher consciousness, ideas. And for some reason, they seem to be dominating this place, and they use, like I said, certain humans to help them to occupy certain major positions, to help them dominate the world, to dominate all the resources, all the educational systems, the economic systems, what else, on and on. Yes, that's what we believe. That's what we argued several years ago, and that's what we still believe.
Well, so do you believe in that David Icke essentially scenario? It sounds like.
David Icke, yes, I think he's essentially correct.
Do you think they...
I hate to, you know, I mean, it's a terrible scenario. I mean, I just hate to be like this, and I know that Ike and me and others are just simply dismissed and disliked and everything else because we have this scenario. But I don't know. I come from different directions than Ike does, and Ike comes in from different directions than someone else, and there are several others, not just
right.
Ike and others. So yes, I think he's essentially correct.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe there are these rituals of you know?
Yes, yes. The evidence that we've come across suggests that they are extremely ritualistic. You might find that they get into rituals, and that in fact the rituals seem to wake up certain latent capabilities within their own, say, half-breeds, and they are able to go ahead and carry out their dark agendas. And what I mean by dark agendas, against the truth. You know, whatever agendas that is, and they're pretty dark, it seems to us. Yes, I'm again, it's a sad situation, but I think basically what we feel is that when you really realize what situation we're in this world, you'll try to do everything you can to consciously evolve out of this world and get away from this where you have to you have to believe in reincarnation, as we do. Get out of this cycle, as you know, a lot of ancient teachings try to teach us. Get out of this cycle that we're in, down here in this physical plane, and go somewhere else where it's much nicer. No wars, no plagues, no whatever they use.
So do you think that these guys somehow are not able to evolve spiritually as humans can?
That is a good question. I think once a being, any kind of being, as to be a human being or a reptilian being, starts a negative path, you know, and doesn't turn it around, I think they can go pretty far down the negative ways and become quite diabolical, as they have in many cases. It just seems that is what they've done, and they're a long way from. And they want to, and like I said, they're trying to do everything they can to cover up the very idea that we can actually evolve out of this type of very negative situation.
I address the reptilian concept, which has been, of course, the center of what David Icke has been doing, and we have certain differences. And Zachariah Sitchin's work, I talk about that. I'm in the tradition of these kinds of scholars. It is crucially important that this is not accepted as mere history lesson of the past. These motifs have a very great bearing on our age. I mean, you only have to look at your own mythologies. The trolls, the dwarves, the elves. Where do they all come from? Why is it that we, in our burial ritual, right, in the Christian world, when you die, there's a ritual of being put back into the earth? Ask any Zuni Indian, ask any Hopi Indian about the Hollow Earth. You know exactly what you're talking about. It's completely replete in all the mythologies of the world about underground cities. And in fact, Admiral Byrd from the United States Naval Air Force, right? He flew over entrances to the Hollow Earth. You have experts who know all about this, who've written extensively on the Hollow Earth. And caverns that sometimes go as far as 8 miles down, you know, with literally thousands of miles of ventilated shafts. Eric von Daniken has gone blue in the face trying to expose this. That these are caverns that some of them are not natural, some of them are carved with precision, with laser, tools. And these, I explain from the outset of my book, I go into this, it's a very important factor. And in fact, there was even a prohibition in the Bible about drawing the likeness of any being that came from under the water and from under the earth. Actually, it's in the Ten Commandments even. And you will find that if you go back to Celtic mythology, there are talking about beings that inhabited the hollow earth and under the earth. Back again to the concept of secret budgets and secret societies, the governments of the world had long been seeking, because our pole shifted, you know, and the earth topography has changed, so lots of the normal entrances to hollow earth have since changed, and some of them were in Antarctica, and therefore the ice on Antarctica makes it a problem now for people to visit there and go there. So the Nazis under the Adolf Hitler and the fascists that rule this country, namely the government, they have always been funding different individuals to try and go and reopen portals and to find entrances to hollow earth. So Admiral Byrd was simply an agent who had flown over there, and he had a large budget, and they took ships out there, and some people say that they discovered entrances to hollow earth. You know, there's also hollow earth entrances in the north, and I've researched this for many years, and I actually know where a great deal of entrances to hollow earth are. Today, we have the criticism, and it's a correct criticism, that our scientific, technological abilities are far in excess of our psychological, spiritual, and emotional development. And many pundits, many activists, many scholars have said, why is this? Why is this happening in our society? Well, again, there is a definite answer. It's because we've had a propulsion unit behind us, making sure that we are propelled towards technological advance at the cost of the other. Because this is not something, again, that would happen naturally, right? It just doesn't happen naturally, and if you see it happening in the world, it is because there's some artificial engineering going on that makes sure of this. And it connects to what I'm talking about, where the visitation of these beings has been moving mankind steadily forward in a technological way because they have an agenda.
Yes.
I personally, I brought David Icke to America. He was in America because I brought him here personally.
Yes.
And so I'm saying that I am totally convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, for myself, that there are such things as reptile aliens. Though I have never seen one, thank God, but I totally believe they are here. Not because of David Icke, not because of Crito Mutwa, who I love listening to, a wonderful, fascinating man. David Icke has done great stuff. But I believe there are reptile aliens here because of my own personal research. I have been in the company of at least 8 people over the past many years, 8 different people. Each one is extraordinarily well-grounded people. Airline pilot, one with a major airlines, a very wealthy man in Las Vegas who buys and sells commercial hotels, buildings, etc. Extremely wealthy man. Christian, incidentally. Very Christian man, but very, very wealthy and very highly intelligent man. Sat down and told me about his personal one-on-one with a reptile alien in which many others in his church were privy to see. That's a whole story in itself. That happened in Colorado. And then to have scientists and a young lady who was one of my favorite people in the world, a young lady called Nancy, who just blew me away. And on my radio show, I used to have a show, and one night I had Nancy on, and Nancy just blew the audience away. She is so feminine, so incredibly charming and feminine girl, talking about stuff that will blow your mind. Her father was in the Air Force, her family was Air Force, but her father was in charge of Project Retrievables for the Air Force. The man who was in charge of going out wherever in the world, any extraterrestrial activity, he was in charge in the Air Force to go there first. And he was the boss. And she said, and the modus operandi was always the same. She told me an experience that just blew my mind about a reptile alien, and you really have to hear it from her. But she basically, the story, and it's so fascinating, I got to tell you. She said her father would never allow her to be left alone in the house ever. When he would go off during the day, they live on base. They live on base. Doesn't matter. When he would leave the house, immediately military would come and guard all four corners of the property. They would sit there in cars and guard while he's gone. Anywhere. Her mom and dad were going next door to a party next door, and she asked her dad if she could stay, and she was like 13, 14 years old. And he said, no, absolutely not. So she talked to her mother, and the mother talked to the father, and got him to agree that she could stay home. And so she said, so for the first time in her life, she was actually going to be alone in the house by herself. And she said, so she was in a bedroom, she said, combing her hair, and she had a mirror that she could see her closet. She said she was combing her hair, looking at the closet door, and all of a sudden the closet door opened up, and a reptile alien stepped out. And she said he had to bend down to get under the header, and he stood up. She said it was a full-grown man, extremely muscular, but it was a reptile body, reptile alien head. And she said this thing looked at me, and I'm looking at it in the mirror. And she said he started moving toward me without moving his legs. He was just floating toward her, slowly. And she said, I felt like it was like coming up on a fly. He was, grabbed it quick. And she said she jumped up and screamed and ran down the hallway, ran into the bathroom, locked the door, opened the window, and started screaming. Of course, everybody in the neighborhood heard. She said, and when I heard, and this reptile alien, she said, came down the hallway, and I could feel that him walking because he was so heavy. And he was scraping on the door, growling like a dinosaur growl, scraping on the door. And she said that when her father and the neighbors come running up, they opened the door. When they come running up, they were yelling outside. This reptile alien ran back down the hallway into her bedroom and disappeared. She said when her father came in, the bathroom door was just ripped. And obviously, the father said he was not going to hurt her, but it was a message. And he said, that's why I never wanted her to stay alone. Because these aliens have told us, the Air Force, that you keep poking your nose into our business. Every time something happens, you come out, poke your nose. So we just want you to know, the next time something happens, and you poke your nose into our business, while you're out here poking your nose into our business, some of us are going to come visit your daughter. So you need to stay home and stay out of our business. And so he said, so that's why they always had military around anytime he left. And so when she was telling me this story about other reptile aliens, and of course I've heard it from so many legitimately important people, I have to believe that there is something to this story.
And this is a guy who, believes in Jesus and all that stuff, which if he wants to do that, that's great. But the point is, it wasn't some way out guy who smokes a weed or something and has visions. And he was arrested and taken to the police station. And in the police station, when he was being held down and the sergeant came over, he said the sergeant shapeshifted in front of him, turned into a reptile, and then came back to human, and then shapeshifted again and returned. So then when you talk to insiders, and when you look back at the texts that talk about the fact that this serpent race exists in planes unknown to man, just outside this frequency range, then there is a gathering mass of evidence that this is going on. And, you know, again, people who dismiss it without question, without research, and without reading further about it, they're not making a statement about me. They're making a statement about themselves. The idea that they can come to definite conclusions about something without even looking at it. I mean, excuse me, and you claim to be in control of your own mind. So it's not my job to persuade them. I don't want to persuade them. But the point is, there's a gathering mass of evidence to support it. And what I was going to say is, you know, you talk to physicists, and even within this frequency range, this narrow frequency range that we can access, that we call the universe, we can only see about 10% of the matter that exists in this universe. We can only see matter that reflects light. Luminous matter, they call it. Dark matter that doesn't reflect light in a way that we can perceive it, we can't see. So, you look at the fantastic diversity of genetics and expressions of life that we can see in this tiny 10% and less of this one little frequency range, then you kind of think outside of this frequency range is infinity. If entities had not evolved through the reptilian stream, when you look at the unbelievable diversity of the reptilian species in this tiny little 10% of the universe that we can see, in this little frequency range, then it's not that it's fantastic that this species could throw up a form that is humanoid and has an intellectual intelligence. It's actually staggering if it had not done so. I spoke at this conference in America, and I talked to this guy who ran a magazine, and he was a real straight Christian patriot guy, not into all this, you know, stuff. And he said to me, you know, I like your stuff, he said. I like all your political stuff and all your secret societies, he said, but I have a real problem with this reptilian thing, right? And the shape-shifting. He said, I can't get any head around that. I said, fair enough, not a problem. Just take what you like and leave the rest of it. So anyway, the next day, I walk into the area where he is, and everyone's in the conference listening to somebody, so the room's empty. He said, oh, God, I told you. He said, I told you. He said, last night, he said, I met this man who had a real problem with me because of something I did that he didn't like, something I wrote he didn't like. He said, and he got angry and angry and angry, and he was screaming, you know, kind of totally lost it. He said, and the hotel manager came over and said, look, hey, can you take this elsewhere, please? You're upsetting the other customers. So he thought, I'm out of here, I can't take this anymore. And he went to the elevator. And as the elevator doors were closing, this guy, still at it, comes in the elevator, right in his face, get absolutely livid. And he said he shapeshifted in front of me. So he was then much more open to the fact that this is no illusion. This is conditioned to believe that people manifest and entities manifest as like human bodies, because that's the conditioned mind reacting. And I understand that, but any conditioned mind that says, I am not going to look at the evidence, I'm just going to dismiss it because it is so different, is a conditioned mind that is unbelievably imprisoned while thinking it's free. we are given a conditioned reality that is so different from what's actually happening, that gap, that chasm between what we're conditioned from cradle to grave to believe is reality, the movie screen, and what's going on is so great that lots of people can't make that leap. And that's not by accident, that's by design.
I have talked to hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world. I've been to more than 40 countries researching this, who have told me the same basic recurring story of seeing people, often in positions of power, but not always, change from a human into a reptilian form and then go back again. Sometimes it's for a few seconds, sometimes it's for longer.
My name is Mona Kempka. I'm 55 years old. I've been a psychiatric nurse for 30 years. I've lived alone for the last 10 years. In 1994, a reptoid appeared in my living room. 6'3", thin waist, giant muscular legs. This being could kill 5 men with a swat. I was asleep because I worked the night shift. And I woke up, and mere inches in front of my face, there he was. And I was really freaked out. I stood up in my bed screaming. He appeared to me for 6 seconds, and I was standing up in my bed, screaming, then he vanished. And I just sat down in my bed, and I started laughing hysterically. It wasn't because I thought it was funny, I was just hysterical. I didn't know who to call. I thought even my own mother would not believe this.
David Icke truly seems to be one of the most referenced and most trusted sources for information on the subject of reptilians. The reoccurring bloodline theme expressed in various cultures from past to present is definitely a theme that Icke uses a lot for his case. With this notion comes the idea that certain people from these ancient bloodlines are truly human, but because of their genetics, the reptilians, which Icke believes are the fourth-dimensional beings, can latch on and essentially possess these people. Some also believe that certain people, usually those in power or in the media, are actually full-on reptilians that look human with the use of a holographic type suit that covers up their true appearance. This idea has gained a bit of popularity since videos have surfaced showing different people, usually news reporters, supposedly shapeshifting. Their faces and sometimes bodies, including their clothes, begin to look distorted, forming odd, digitized patterns. This could very well be the signs of such a holographic device malfunctioning. After all, a broken hologram must look somewhat similar to that. However, because these videos are online and usually aren't the best quality, due to being compressed or converted and reused over and over, it's really hard to say it could be anything more than just that, poor quality video. Now of course, this could also be the case with the other type of shapeshift videos out there, the ones that focus on the eyes. However, because the eye changing seems more plausible, and because the fourth-dimensional bloodline theory seems to hold more sway to truth seekers, filmmakers have decided to focus on that rather than pixelated faces and shirts. The truth is, we really don't know what's going on in either type of video. Could it just be a strange video distortion, or something more? It's up to you to decide. Over the past 3 hours, we have explored the numerous plausible points in the case for the existence of reptilians. First, we covered the mythological existence of reptilians throughout ancient cultures. As we have shown, every culture on Earth has some type of belief in dragons, serpent gods, and other forms of reptilian creatures. The idea that all of these civilizations, though separated by miles and miles of land and oceans, all share similar beliefs in what their gods look like is quite astounding. The fact that a lot of these ancient cultures also possessed extensive knowledge of the stars and built their magnificent monoliths in accordance with the constellations should be proof in itself that the planet has been visited by beings from another world. Also, the fact that these ancient peoples all have left art, sculptures, and texts describing these serpent gods in a familiar fashion should be considered as well. Once again I ask, How can these isolated civilizations all come to the same conclusions? It would be downright impossible, wouldn't it? Though many believe, as well as myself, that there must be various forms of extraterrestrials out there, the reptilian form is by far the most prevalent throughout the ancient world. From the first recorded civilization in Sumer, to ancient Egypt and Africa, to the stories in the Bible, to the Greeks and medieval Europe, from Japan, China, and even to North America, the idea of the dragon or serpent god has manifested itself, and it is here to stay. We also looked at how reptilian traits are found heavily in the DNA of humans. Most scientists hold the belief that we did in fact evolve from primitive reptiles. While developing in the womb, the human fetus is strongly similar to developing reptiles at a certain stage. At one point while developing, human fetuses do in fact have more reptilian traits than human traits. As fetuses, our developing bone structure also mimics those seen in dinosaurs. We have a tail at a certain point in the womb, and as we have shown, some humans are still born with the tail to this day. We also discussed the phenomenon of the Rh-negative blood factor, a rare blood type found in the ancient Basque people, who were said to be great explorers and megalith builders, and possibly linking Rh-negatives with the ancient Sumerians and Egyptians, and hence giving support to the Anunnaki bloodline theme seen over and over throughout history. We also briefly covered the physical reptilian traits that sometimes accompanies the Rh-negative trait. The most interesting fact we covered in the chapter was the idea of the reptilian brain, or the R-complex. This prehistoric part of the brain is quite similar to the brains of primitive and modern reptiles. We went over how the great Dr. Carl Sagan believed how the R-complex played a major role in our evolution and is still prevalent in our modern thinking and behavior. Sagan even postulated that the cosmos is so vast that he himself would be more surprised if a reptilian humanoid species did not exist. Next, we covered one of the most valid points in the reptilian case. Of course, I am speaking of the Troodon dinosaur and Dr. Dale Russell's amazing NASA thought experiment, where he created the dinosauroid. The fact that mainstream science can only speculate on the extinction of the dinosaurs is in my mind a plausible point alluding to the fact that we really don't know what happened to them. Yes, these giant beasts did in fact rule the world at one point. Though they were very large animals, their brains were far from big. Of course, if some great cataclysm struck the earth long ago, which it probably did, these giant thunder lizards would not be intelligent enough to evade certain destruction. But not all of the dinosaurs were gigantic, dumb animals. As we have shown, Troodon's brain was much larger than its huge cousin, the T-Rex. Hence, Troodon is a major exception. Being that certain species of prehistoric reptiles, such as alligators, are still alive today, who's to say Troodon wasn't able to do the same? The interior of the Earth is so open and vast that Troodon could have easily went underground to escape the comet that is said to have wiped everything out. This idea is strikingly similar to the tales and legends of lizardmen and dinosaurs living inside the Earth. Also, as you have seen, Dale Russell's concept of the dinosauroid, or Troodon, after eons of evolution, looks eerily similar to the description of modern-day reptilians by eyewitnesses. Of course, who can forget the symbolism? Reptilian symbolism is so rampant in our world that one cannot simply ignore it. We covered certain terms and phenomenon, such as the mystical kundalini or serpent energy. We covered the iconic Ouroboros, an ancient term and talisman most popularly recognized in alchemy and its connections to medieval serpent and dragon beliefs. And most importantly, the caduceus, the ancient serpent symbol that also has links to alchemy and more recently the practice of medicine. We also showed you the countless examples of art, sculptures, and architecture from the ancient and modern world depicting serpent and reptilian imagery. From dragon statues in London to the old coat of arms of various aristocratic bloodlines and organizations, our world is soaked with this symbolism. We've showed you how reptilian symbols and images are found heavily in modern corporate logos and advertisements, as well as military patches. It seems a lot of government black ops groups, found mostly in, but not limited to the United States, use snakes, dragons, and other reptilian images to identify themselves. We showed you ancient petroglyphs and carvings depicting similar symbols. The truth is, the signs are all around you, and there's no denying it. We discussed to some extent the hollow earth theory and how it goes hand in hand with the reptilian belief found in ancient cultures. Every civilization that believes in reptilian beings also seems to contend that these beings live within the earth or under oceans and lakes, and this is no coincidence. As we have shown, the inner Earth hypothesis has been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and was heavily popularized by the writings of people like Edmund Halley of Halley's Comet fame, and even more by the prophetic writer Jules Verne. We expose the connections Verne had with secret societies, a notion that has reoccurred over the past couple of centuries, connecting such elite societies, governments, and other groups with the knowledge of mystical realms and the mystical creatures that exist within these realms. We covered key subjects from the Hollow Earth idea, such as Admiral Byrd and the ancient land of Shambhala and its connections to the reptilian Nagas. We even featured NASA satellite photos supposedly showing the entrances to the Hollow Earth at the North and South Poles. Whether the reptilians have traveled from another planet or originated here on the Earth, the evidence pointing to these creatures making their home underground is just overwhelming. If reptilians do in fact exist, it seems they definitely come from inside the planet. In one of our longest chapters, we covered the immense amount of reptilian references in popular culture. This extended segment of the film is not so much direct evidence for the existence of the reptilians, but moreover, a sign of just how heavily ingrained the idea of lizardmen, dragons, and the like have infiltrated our collective consciousness. We showed you the various TV shows, movies, games, and so on that feature reptilian humanoids and talking dinosaurs. We started with the vast symbology seen in the popular 90s sitcom Dinosaurs. This show hints at the corporate and elite control of aristocratic bloodlines over the planet and its resources. We also portrayed the hidden meanings within the show and the reptilian connection to the St. Clair Sinclair name and the Knights Templar, alluding once again to the secret societies and the knowledge that they contain. The filmmaker showed you example after example of the reoccurring theme of reptilian characters in pop culture in one of the most extensive and thorough studies of the subject ever seen. The abundance of reptilian references within the media is to us another plausible point in the reptilian case. If the global elite really are shape-shifting reptilians, you know damn well that some of these references are intentionally placed into popular media, a hidden sign for anyone willing to read in between the lines. Does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? In one of the most interesting sections of this film, we cover the key researchers in the study of reptilians as well as their retelling of others' encounters with these scary creatures. These experts, some of them actual scholars from top universities, all discuss their ideas of who or what the reptilians are. Some even claim to have actually seen one. Though some of their ideas on the reptilians vary, they all undeniably believe in their existence. These people all come from different backgrounds, and they are the true experts on the subject. We definitely felt compelled to feature their amazing tales in this film. David Icke, of course, is one of the top experts in this field, and we spent a decent amount of time covering him. But he is so full of great information that the filmmakers strongly suggest you learn more about him and his ideas. He has a lot to offer on this subject. No film about the reptilians would be complete without David Icke. Are Icke and other researchers really onto something? It's up to you whether to believe them or not. We also just briefly showcased the shape-shifting phenomenon. As stated earlier, we're not dismissing the holographic distortion videos that are beginning to emerge. We are merely stating that the eye-changing types of videos, such as the ones we showed a few minutes ago, seem a little more probable, thanks to the large belief in the shape-shifting and hybrid bloodline theme posed by David Icke and others. It's easier to dismiss a glitch covering complete face and body than a glitch merely within the eyes. But who knows for sure? We suppose the ultimate test is to see either phenomenon happen in person, which unfortunately your humble narrator has not. Hopefully, you were able to learn for yourself just how entangled our world is with the reptilian theme. From the carvings of the ancient world to modern-day kids' cartoons, the reptilian archetype has solidified itself among society. The signs are all around us, even within us, as we pointed out earlier. Whether accidental or placed here on purpose, the idea of them is seen everywhere in our daily lives, regardless if reptilians really exist or not. The fact is, we really don't know if these creatures are real, but in an ever-expanding universe, I know for damn sure human beings aren't the only life forms out there. There must be other species within the vast depths of the cosmos, and we can all bet they come in various shapes and sizes. Why couldn't some be reptilian, right? But of course, we just don't know. I don't, and no one that I know has ever seen a reptoid. And to us, seeing is pretty much crucial to believing in it, usually. But we are still very open to the possibility. There are many people that have claimed to have seen these beings, so we're not discounting the notion. Ask yourself, how many people believe in God without ever seeing or hearing Him? What I'm trying to say is, when it comes to the theme of the reptilians, serpents, dragons, and everything else, there is literally more evidence of that than there is of God's existence. That's just a fact. Even though there's a lot of evidence for the case of reptilians, I would still have to say, I personally don't know, but it's very plausible. Millions of people across the globe have seen UFOs, so I ask you, who's piloting them? Some could be your typical gray alien, some could be human, others could be reptilian. The possibility is definitely there. And furthermore, people shouldn't be so fast to say these UFOs are from out there when they probably come from inside the Earth. As we showed you earlier, there's a lot of evidence for this. Whether piloted by reptilian humanoids or not, the evidence for interterrestrials is just too abundant. We really wanted to approach the reptilian subject using an objective point of view. We also wanted to take a wide variety of evidence, some obviously being more substantial than others, and throw all of it out there in the most orderly, thorough way possible. It's up to you, the viewer, to decide what to make of it. We certainly didn't want to cover this subject like most others do on YouTube. Anyone who stumbles onto 5 minutes of glitchy MPEG and then swears up and down that reptilians are for real needs to reevaluate the meaning of Truth Seeker. We felt we did well covering this vast subject, but we have barely scratched the surface with our research. There's so much more information out there that we truly could have made this film go on forever, it seems. However, we felt that we encompassed all the major points for the case of the reptilians. Keep in mind, the case we are making is not so much for the existence of the reptilian beings, though it's plausible. We're just making the case to seriously investigate this subject, like the people we mentioned earlier in this film. There is a huge divide in the truth movement right now over the idea of the reptilians, and though Infinite Freethinkers usually delves into the more tangible conspiracy subjects, we would like to meld the two camps together in a responsible, sensible, and cohesive manner, or at least expand on this theory in a more organized way, for those that are open-minded about it. We never stray away from the evidence, no matter what we are researching, and though there is not as much concrete evidence for the reptilians as there is for, let's say, 9/11 being an inside job, or JFK being killed by our government, there is surely enough evidence for the reptilians to keep searching for more. There's enough evidence to keep the debate going.